Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Security Repo Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dwayne, and we'd love for you to share our show with your friends, family, help everybody be a little more secure out there. So please like and subscribe. It does help us out a great deal here on YouTube and the other platforms. This week, we have a really awesome guest that I was fortunate enough to meet and listen to one of my favorite presentations in recent memory at Wild West Hacking Fest. We have Bleon Proko. He's passionate about InfoSec, and that includes infrastructure pen testing and security, working with Active Directory, cloud and hybrid infrastructures, as well as all areas of defense, detection, and threat hunting. He's presented at BlackHat USA, Europe, Sector, DEF CON, and many others, including a lot of BSides, both here and in Europe, and of course at Wild West Hacking Fest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being on your show and being interviewed by you. And it was very nice meeting you on Wild West Hacking Fest. And again, thank you very much for for having me on your own podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Well, again, you said some things that really shook my notions of how AWS works and how some security assumptions I have made and some things that I assumed were security protocols. And that's what I wanted to just dig right in. At Wild West Hacking Fest, you gave this awesome presentation on the AWS quarantine policy for exposed AWS keys. Um, that's basically what I wanted to dig in for the first part of the show. So maybe we could just start there. What is this quarantine user policy? Maybe just a high level overview of what's going on with AWS keys.
So in AWS, you have different types of identities. The most common one is the IAM user, which has a permanent set of credentials, an ID and a secret. There are cases when accidentally or maliciously those secrets get out. They either get compromised, and AWS kind of knows from a set of detections that they have that these are being maliciously used. Or there are cases when those are found publicly on GitHub repos, on past bins, on even on sites that sell them. So, to prevent specific tampering of security, or what they call to prevent financial fraud, to prevent impact on your own infrastructure, they attach a policy on your own user. Now, for those of you that do not know, in AWS policies, deny always goes before allow. So if you have 10 allows and then another policy that says deny 5 of them, you are only allowed to do 5 things. So the quarantine policy takes this concept and basically denies you access to a series of privileges which cannot be used by that identity as until the administrator actually removes that policy from the user. That way, as I said, the impact that identity, those leaked credentials have, is lower than the impact that it would have without that policy.
So basically, if I leak my key, AWS finds that key, they slap a set of
Yes.
restrictions on it.
Yes.
But this sounds like on the surface, this is a security feature. Like let's lock it
Yes.
down. And your take on this is actually AWS's take on this is not actually a security policy. This is a cost reduction policy.
Yeah. Well, we had a discussion with them, and we they literally told us this is not a security policy, and we were like, it does feel a bit like a security policy. The I do kind of understand where they're coming from, though I'm not sure I'm completely okay with what they're saying. So they don't call it a security policy because if they called it a security policy, they should quite literally limit everything that identity can do, because there are a lot of stuff, as we will see, and if you want you can also read the blog. There are a lot of stuff that the identity can still is not prevented from doing, from this policy. If they wanted to call this a security policy, they had to look at a lot of stuff like what privileges the identity has, how the identity operates, what are the activities that the identity usually does, then limit those, then hope that this does not break availability for the client, and a bunch of other stuff that can affect the client. So what they do is they quite literally just put some security stuff that will prevent most of the privilege escalation paths, and some other stuff that have been seen around to affect the targets, like the LLM, which again we will talk about later on, but the LLM stuff and the Bedrock stuff, which were seen being used out in the public. And the reason why they call it a fraud prevention is because they cannot assure security to your own infrastructure through this policy, but they can assure that the impact will be lower than what it was before. So they can't say, okay, you are safe now that you have this policy, but they can't say that, okay, you're on your own. You leak the key, just find out about it. They kind of find a middle ground, which is by possible, but it's still not as bad as it would be without a policy. That's
So
why they call it
if I
like that.
find the key, I can't just walk in and hone everything. It does
Yes,
restrict certain
yes.
very common paths and very common matter. So let's talk about that a little bit. One of the other things I really liked about your presentation, and this is in your blog post, which we'll link down in the show notes. Uh, Very importantly, this doesn't grant rights. This doesn't give privilege. This literally restricts privilege, but it also only restricts a subset of the possible things you could have set for that user. Maybe you could just give us a quick overview on like what is the big things that it is restricting versus what is it leaving out?
Okay, so the I will talk about the version 3 of the policy now because it was updated after we submitted the blog and the report to AWS. So, as I said before, in AWS policies, deny always goes before allow. In AWS, an identity is allowed to have 10 policies, up to 10 policies attached to them. If you have 9 policies, which each of them allow 10 privileges, which means 90 privileges allowed, and you have one policy which denies all of them, you are not allowed to do any of the stuff. So it takes one policy to deny everything that everything else has allowed is allowed by other policies attached to you. This is the concept that they take. They attach this policy with the idea that, okay, it doesn't matter what kind of privileges this identity is allowed or not allowed, we are still restricting those that we consider to be the most impactful and the most impactful to your own infrastructure. That way, in any scenario, it doesn't matter if the identity is an administrator, is part of the administrators group, is allowed an organization access, whatever, they will be restricted to executing those privileges. This is a good thing because and the way they have built everything is a good thing, because right now you don't have to go and look around and try to understand what should be denied and what should not be denied. You literally put a policy that restricts what you don't want to be allowed, and the other ones will be invalidated. Again, as I said, this is a good thing. And this is, in my opinion, one of the really good ways that AWS policies work. Because right now you have each permissions being defined and ways on how you can allow and deny them. As far as the policy goes, the most impactful thing that they touch upon is the privilege escalation pathways. If you look at the privilege escalation pathways, and you have a GitHub from RhinoSec with 28, if I'm not wrong, or 29 privilege escalation methods, most of them deal with either attaching a policy or adding a policy to an identity or group, or just adding a role to a service. Now, adding a role to service is done through IAM pass role, and attaching or adding a policy is done through attach user role or group policy, or put user role or group policy, or you can just update a certain policy using update policy version. So this is what they usually, so this is the most impactful thing that they deal with, without allowing the identity to actually tamper with permissions. They prevent privilege escalation. Now, as we will see later, what they do not prevent is actually lateral movement. So going from one privilege to another, and going from one identity to another one, which does not, which does have higher privileges than the one that they do have. But this is one of the things that they do to prevent. Another thing that they do prevent is preventing starting instances. This an instance is a server in AWS. This prevents crypto mining. We have seen a lot of cases of criminals just creating an instance after they get access to do so, and then create an, especially a high-end instance, a very expensive and very powerful one, and do crypto mining through that for as long as they can. Just fishing for whatever target they can get and actually going and doing that. Other than that, they do have some stuff like S3, uh, limiting the S3, especially limiting deleting buckets and objects, which can affect an infrastructure a lot, because if you delete objects, which are files inside S3 buckets, you can delete data, and if you delete the whole bucket, you have completely removed all the data that they had stored there, and hopefully they had good backups. And lastly, the last part that they do to prevent is something that was added there after a research that our manager, the P0 manager Ian Al did on a group that was maliciously using leaked credentials to create a well, you could say a porn site, an interactive AI-enabled porn site, which they were selling to other customers that they had. So this was basically the things that they do prevent. As I said, not necessarily security, but it does prevent some stuff from happening on your own infrastructure.
I mean, that's wild. I'm glad that they put this in place because those are some nasty use cases. But I kind of want to frame the rest of this talk around here on what people can do to actually protect themselves. Like, obviously, don't let your secrets leak. If it was just that simple, we would never leak an AWS key. Uh, but it sounds like this is a little bit of advocacy for that privilege of least, or the uh, principle of least permissions. Like, the more widely you scope these users, it seems like that's going to be your foothold, because while they're restricting these specific things, there's a lot that they're just not touching, right?
Yes. So my best recommendation would be uh, have a policy ready, especially if you have sensitive identities which you do not want to get attacked. Have a policy ready, and I on my blog and on my presentations I have added several permissions which you should be wary about, and you can add more. It's not just limited to that, but have a policy ready. And the moment you get an email, you will always get an email the moment a leaked key is leaked. You will get an email from AWS. The moment you get the email, immediately go and attach your own policy aside from the quarantine policy that AWS attaches. That way, your identity will be a lot more restricted. Then, based on what activity your identity will be having, start to remove those privileges until you can just update the credentials. Then update the credentials, and now you are not insecure anymore, because you know that those credentials are not uh, badly affected, and of course detect usage of those credentials in case somebody else has done that. But if you are sure that that hasn't happened and you have changed the credentials, somebody else cannot use the previous ones. The only thing they will have is just two strings and nothing else, because those will be invalidated. That way you have, so take the idea that the quarantine policy has, just extended a bit more by adding what you consider to be dangerous. Doing that will limit the scope of that identity a lot more, and then you can go and apply the credentials change. Because one thing we are seeing is that you can tell people, okay, your keys are leaked, cool, change them. Yeah, usually it's not that easy. You have workflows and you have several systems using them, and you have a lot of stuff which do get affected. So what you do is just lower the impact and then go and change the credentials, and then detect everything that happened with those credentials, check for potential compromises, and if you see no potential compromises, then you can continue with the rest, and you can monitor those credentials, yeah, but you at least know that you are safe. And another thing where AWS does help in this is they offer you something called event history, which will keep every event being executed on an account for 90 days, which will be more than enough time for you to detect for potential compromises, even if you don't have a SIM.
That's the goal of detect as fast as possible and react as fast as possible. I mean, we definitely want to see from my side of the world, from the AppSec side of the world, that key rotation much faster. But to your point, wow, yeah, what falls down if you just pull that out and then you've broken the A and the CIA triad, the availability, and now you're not doing security, you're breaking production, which is the opposite of what you want to do here. So this is, I think, this sounds like a really good path for people that are like trying to figure out this IAM and IAM security is build on the policy there. I really like that approach. I like understanding a little bit more what's going on in the covers. That's going to help us scope things a lot closer. Let's move over to the rapid fire part of the show. We have 4 questions we ask every single one of our guests. Thanks for being here, but we want to get to know you a little bit better. And these are the 4 questions we ask everybody. So let's just start with the first one. What is your favorite all time command line security tool?
One that I usually use the most, and one that has helped me a lot or two, has always been Nmap and Metasploit, and people, just look down on them a lot because of the fact that Metasploit is detected too much, but Metasploit is a lot more than just 10 payloads that it has, It's like 1,500 modules of exploits and scanners and stuff. You don't have to actually exploit the thing. You can just scan based on a working exploit.
So you have held many security jobs in your life and been entered through a lot of interviews, I would assume. What is your favorite all time interview question when you're getting hired for a job?
But I always like the questions that lead to a case study and a debate with. So usually when we go from the HR to the technical person, the question that I usually like is, as I said, questions that lead to a debate and lead to a case study, because those questions are never yes and no. They are always, okay, show me, give me your opinion on how this can be done. And even if I don't get the job, even if I don't pass the interview, I can always just get a new grasp on what the other person thinks about a certain issue, and they can get a grasp of how I think about a certain issue. And that's, in my opinion, how you better differentiate between a good candidate and a not so good candidate, because a good candidate will have experience, which will lead to actually, giving you more information.
That's good advice in general. But if you're out there listening and you're doing interviews, make sure that you're having your interviewees think, not just answer yes and no, not just check
Yeah.
boxes. All right. Best advice, worst advice. Let's start with the best. What's the best security advice you're currently hearing out there or that you've ever heard?
since I also come from mostly a cloud environment, identity is a lot more important than people make it to be, especially in cloud. Identity is, as they call it, the new perimeter. You can lock down the whole cloud environment, and I can just use the API to access. And even on another, on-prem infrastructure, you will always have VPNs and remote access and everything. So all of them deal with identity. So always be wary of what you allow a certain identity, and always be wary of how you allow identities to authenticate, especially if you're not using stuff like multi-factor authentication, which scarily I've seen a lot of VPN, a lot of companies have VPNs without MFA. So, this is the best security advice I can give. And the worst security advice I can give is, I would say, zero trust. Zero trust is, then, I'm being controversial in here because I'm literally saying that, in my previous one, but do not rely too much on zero trust as zero trust. You can never have zero trust because you can literally lock down everything, and you will still have to give certain identities more permissions just to do their normal job. So no, never just think that, okay, I've limited everything, I've done everything through the zero trust principles and everything, and now I'm safe.
Yeah, would not expect people to say zero trust is the worst advice, but when you explain it that way, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And it is, I love a hot take. We love controversial takes around here, and you get people thinking. All right, man. Well, thanks for being on the show. It was great to have you. Here at the end of the show, we always give our guests a chance to say their piece. Anything else you want to say to the audience? Anything you want to plug? Talk about your blog? Anything like that?
Well, one thing that I do have that I usually try to tell others, I do have a tool that I am working on. I've been working for like, what, 3 and something years. Nebula, just use it. Please submit any issues that you can find. I'm not able to track everything. So the more issues you can submit, the easier it will be for me to actually give a really good tool. And I'm trying to give a really nice cloud pen testing framework. So just, you know, it would be very helpful if you can actually help me on that end.
All right on. Well, we'll have links to your blogs, to your projects down in the show notes. Won't try to spell them out here and give long URLs over audio clips.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely check the show notes. They'll be in there. And of course, we'll link back to where we can get a hold of you out on LinkedIn and whatnot. Well, again, thank you for being here. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. And thank you for illuminating us on what the heck's going on with these AWS user access or US quarantine policies. So thanks for being here. And hopefully I'll run into you again at another conference soon.
Thank you. Thank you for
All right.
having, and see you, man.